Shock. During Christmas dinner at my son's house, I suddenly felt ill. Shaking, I went to the kitchen to drink some water and saw a strange jar with a liquid substance. When I read the label, I froze. Then I dialed 911, and that difference between a family celebration and the truth changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The evening news droned about inflation rates when the telephone's shrill ring sliced through my peaceful living room. I fumbled for my reading glasses, squinting at the caller ID. Wayne. My son never called this late on weeknights. Dad? His voice cracked like a teenager's, though he was 42. I need your help, urgently. The desperation in those words made me sit straighter in my worn leather armchair. The coffee cup beside me had gone cold hours ago, forgotten like everything else when worry takes hold. What happened, son? Silence stretched between us, filled only by his ragged breathing. Through the phone I heard footsteps, fast, anxious pacing across what I imagined was his kitchen floor, 40 minutes away in Royal Oak. I lost money, Dad. A lot of money. His voice dropped to a whisper. $50,000. My hand tightened around the receiver. 50,000. That was more than my entire pension lasted in a year. How did you... Cryptocurrency. The word came out bitter, self-loathing. I thought I was being smart, diversifying our savings. Joanna doesn't even know yet. The mantel clock ticked steadily, marking seconds that felt like hours. On television, a weather reporter promised snow by Christmas. Normal life continuing while my son's world crumbled. Wayne, slow down. Tell me exactly what happened. More pacing. A chair scraped against tile. There was this investment opportunity. Digital assets, they called it. The returns looked incredible. 30% in 6 months. I used our emergency fund, our kids' college money, even borrowed against the house. My chest tightened. You mortgaged the house? Not the whole thing. Just a home equity loan. 25,000. His voice broke completely now. Dad, they're demanding payment. The creditors. They say if I don't come up with the money by January 15th, they'll start seizure proceedings. I stood up, my old knees protesting. The living room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing inward. Through the bay window, Mrs. Chen's Christmas lights twinkled cheerfully across the street, a reminder that normal families were preparing for holidays, not financial disasters. Have you talked to a lawyer? Maybe there are options. I can't afford a lawyer. Wayne's voice rose, panic overtaking embarrassment. I can barely afford groceries. Do you understand what I'm telling you? They could take our house. Joanna and the kids would have nowhere to go. The image hit me like cold water. My daughter-in-law's gentle face, little Lula asking why they had to move, 8-year-old Tommy wondering if it was his fault somehow. Children should never carry their parents' mistakes. There has to be something we can do, I said, more to myself than to Wayne. I have some savings, maybe. Dad, you don't understand. His voice turned sharp, cutting. This isn't a few $100s. This is serious adult money. Life-changing money. The tone stung. When had my son started speaking to me like I was a child? Like my modest pension and careful savings were somehow inadequate. I'm trying to help, Wayne. I know you are. He exhaled shakily. But I need real help. Substantial help. The kind that actually makes a difference. Static crackled through the connection. Outside, a car door slammed. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a normal neighborhood where sons didn't call their fathers begging for rescue from their own stupidity. But Wayne was still my son. And despite everything, the poor choices, the entitlement that sometimes crept into his voice, he was still the little boy who used to help me rake leaves in this same yard, who cried when his goldfish died, who called me his hero. Tell me what you need, I said quietly. The silence that followed lasted too long. Long enough for me to realize that Wayne had been building toward something specific. This entire conversation, the careful revelation of details, the emphasis on the children's welfare, had been leading somewhere particular. Dad? Wayne's voice changed again, softer now, almost gentle. But underneath I caught something else, something that made my stomach clench with sudden unease. I'm here. There is one way you could help, one real solution that would fix everything. The way he said real solution made my blood run cold. I remained standing by my armchair, the phone pressed so hard against my ear it ached. Whatever Wayne was about to suggest, I already knew I wouldn't like it. What kind of solution? Well, he cleared his throat, and I could picture him running his free hand through his hair, like he'd done since childhood when planning something questionable. You know how you're always complaining about maintaining that big house? The heating bills, the roof repairs, the yard work? My grip on the receiver tightened. Wayne, what are you getting at? The house is worth at least $300,000 now, probably more with the way property values have been climbing. And you're there all alone, Dad. It's too much for someone your age. Someone my age? The words came out sharper than intended. I'm 68, not 98. But think about it practically. His voice took on that patient, explaining to a child tone that always made me want to hang up. You rattle around in 4 bedrooms by yourself. The maintenance costs are eating up your pension. And honestly, wouldn't you be happier somewhere smaller? Somewhere with less responsibility? I sank back into my chair, understanding flooding through me like ice water. You want me to sell my house? It would solve both our problems, Wayne said quickly, as if speed would make the suggestion less outrageous. You could buy a nice little condo, maybe one of those senior communities, with activities and meal plans. You'd have neighbors your own age, no more worrying about broken gutters or snow removal, and the leftover money would pay for your gambling debts. It wasn't gambling, Dad. It was investing. I shot to my feet again, rage building in my chest like steam in a kettle. This is my home, Wayne. This is where your mother and I lived for 37 years, where we raised you, where she died. Mom's been gone for 3 years. His voice turned cold, mechanical. She's not coming back because you keep her bedroom exactly the same. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered, one hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. How dare you? I'm being practical. You're being sentimental about a building. A building? My voice rose until it echoed off the walls of this building, these walls that held every important memory of my adult life. This is where your mother planted her roses, where we had Christmas morning with you every year until you moved out, where she taught you to ride a bicycle in the driveway. And now it's just an expensive burden. Wayne's patience was wearing thin, his desperation bleeding through the practiced manipulation. Dad, be honest. When's the last time you used the upstairs? When's the last time you entertained anyone in that formal dining room? I thought of Margaret's sewing room, unchanged since the day she died, the way morning light still hit her reading chair by the bedroom window, the kitchen where she'd made my coffee every morning for nearly 4 decades. You don't understand, I said quietly. I understand that you're being selfish. The words hit like a slap. My family is about to lose everything, and you're worried about keeping shrine to the past. A past that's gone, Dad. Mom is gone. Don't you tell me about your mother. She would want you to help us. She would want you to help her grandchildren. But you're so wrapped up in your precious memories that you can't see past your own feelings. My chest burned. The room spun slightly. Wayne's voice continued, relentless now. Think about Lula and Tommy. Think about Joanna. Do they matter less than your empty rooms and photo albums? That's not fair, and you know it. What's not fair is watching my children go homeless, while my father sits in a house worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, too stubborn to make the smart choice. Smart choice, as if selling the home where I'd built my entire life was just another financial transaction, as if Margaret's memory could be packed up and moved to some sterile apartment complex designed for people waiting to die. The answer's no. Silence. Then, what? No, Wayne, I won't sell my house to pay for your mistakes. My mistakes? His voice turned vicious. You mean my attempt to provide better for my family? To give your grandchildren opportunities you never gave me? I gave you everything I could. Everything except the one thing I actually need right now. God, you're exactly like Mom always said. Generous with your advice, stingy with your wallet. The lie was so breathtaking I couldn't speak for a moment. Margaret had never said anything of the sort. She'd been proud of how hard we'd worked, how we'd saved every penny to give Wayne advantages we'd never had. Your mother never... Enjoy your empty house, Dad. Enjoy your precious memories. I hope they keep you warm when you're dying alone in that place. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone. dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry wasp. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. Slowly, carefully, I placed the receiver back in its cradle. The silence that followed felt different from the comfortable quiet of my usual evenings. This was hollow, brittle, the kind of silence that follows explosions. I sank back into my chair, but my body wouldn't settle. Every muscle remained tensed, waiting for another blow. Wayne's words echoed in the empty room, dying alone in that place, as if this house, this home, was somehow a prison instead of the sanctuary Margaret and I had created together. I looked around the living room with new eyes, trying to see what Wayne saw. The furniture was old but well maintained. The carpet showed wear patterns from 30 years of daily life. Family photos covered the mantel. Wayne's graduation, his wedding, the kids' school pictures. Was it really just a museum to the past? My feet carried me to the kitchen without conscious thought. Muscle memory, perhaps, or the need to be somewhere Margaret's presence felt strongest. The oak table where we'd eaten breakfast every morning for decades. The window over the sink where she'd stood washing dishes, humming off-key show tunes. The phone rang again and my heart lurched. Wayne calling back to apologize. But the caller ID showed Frank Dawson's number. "Roger, you sound terrible. What's wrong?" Frank lived 3 houses down. Had been my friend since before Margaret got sick. We'd worked together at Ford for 15 years before retiring, within months of each other. If anyone would understand, it would be Frank. "Wayne called," I said, and somehow those 2 words contained everything. "Ah, let me guess. He needs money." "How did you—" "Roger, I've known that boy since he was stealing apples from my tree at age 7. He's always been impulsive. What's he gotten himself into this time?" I told Frank everything. The cryptocurrency disaster, the threatened foreclosure, the house. When I reached Wayne's final words about dying alone, Frank made a disgusted noise. "That little manipulator, using your grandkids as emotional leverage, then attacking you when it doesn't work." "But what if he's right?" The question had been gnawing at me since I hung up. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe— "Stop right there." Frank's voice turned sharp. "You raised that boy, put him through college, helped him with his down payment when he bought that house. You don't owe him your home because he made stupid choices with his money. But the children have parents who should have thought about them before risking their college funds on get-rich-quick schemes. This isn't your fault, Roger." I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily. Through the window I could see Frank's porch light glowing. Funny how a neighbor could provide more comfort than your own son. He said Margaret would want me to help them. Margaret would want you to help if you could, but she'd also want you to keep your dignity and your home. She'd be furious at Wayne for even asking. The truth of that hit deep. Margaret had loved Wayne fiercely, but she'd never tolerated manipulation or emotional blackmail. She would have seen through his tactics immediately. "What should I do, Frank?" "Nothing. At least not tonight. Don't make any decisions while you're angry and hurt. Wayne will probably call back tomorrow, either to apologize or to try a different approach. Give yourself time to think clearly." After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The furnace kicked on. Normal house sounds that had been my companions for 40 years. I thought about Wayne's suggestion, a senior community with activities and meal plans. The idea made my skin crawl. Organized fun with people I didn't know, eating cafeteria food, living in a box designed for convenience rather than comfort. Then I thought about Christmas morning 3 weeks away. For the past 3 years since Margaret died, Wayne's family had come here. Lula and Tommy opening presents under the tree in the living room. Joanna helping me prepare dinner in this kitchen. Wayne pretending to enjoy my coffee while secretly wishing it was stronger. Would this be the last Christmas in our home? Would Wayne's anger poison even that tradition? I pulled out the photo albums Margaret had so carefully maintained, flipping through pages of memories. Our wedding day, both of us so young and serious. Wayne's first steps on this kitchen floor, birthday parties in the backyard. Margaret in her garden, proud of tomatoes that grew bigger than baseballs. Every room in this house held pieces of our life together, not shrines to the past, as Wayne claimed, but foundations of who I was. How could I explain that selling this house would be like selling my own history? Frank was right about one thing. I shouldn't make decisions tonight. But as I closed the photo albums and turned off the kitchen light, I knew something had changed between Wayne and me. Something that might never heal completely. The boy who used to help me rake leaves had become a man willing to destroy his father's peace of mind for money. And I wasn't sure if forgiveness would come easily for either of us. Sleep had been elusive. I'd spent the night replaying Wayne's cruel words, Frank's wisdom, and my own hurt feelings. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I sat in my familiar armchair with my third cup of coffee, staring at the phone like it might provide answers. The bank statements I'd pulled from my desk drawer lay scattered across the coffee table. $15,000 in savings. My monthly pension of $2,800. Not much by Wayne's standards, but honest money earned through 40 years of engineering work. Maybe I'd been too hasty. Maybe there was still room for compromise. I picked up the receiver, dialed Wayne's number before I could lose courage. The phone rang twice before he answered. Dad? He sounded distracted, maybe eating breakfast. Wayne! I cleared my throat, chose my words carefully. I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. A pause. Background noise. Joanna asking about something, Wayne shushing her. Look, I can't give you $50,000, I continued, but I checked my savings. I have $15,000 available. It's not much, but it's something. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. 15,000? Wayne's voice carried that same dismissive tone from yesterday. Dad, that's not even close to what I need. I know it's not the full amount, but it would help with the immediate pressure. Maybe buy you time to work out a payment plan with the creditors. Payment plan? Wayne laughed, but there was no humor in it. These aren't credit card companies, Dad. These are serious people who want their money now. I gripped the coffee mug tighter. Well, what if I co-signed a loan? My credit is still good. Or maybe we could look into a partial refinance of my house. Stop. Wayne's voice turned sharp. Just stop with the small-time thinking. I don't need a few thousand here and there. I need real money. Substantial money. 15,000 is substantial to me. That's exactly the problem. Your idea of substantial and reality are two different things. My chest tightened. Wayne, I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to feel better about yourself while offering pocket change. Do you have any idea what $50,000 looks like? Your 15,000 is pathetic. The word hit like a physical blow. Pathetic. My life savings, carefully accumulated through decades of modest living, dismissed as pathetic by my own son. Maybe if you hadn't gambled away your family's security. Don't lecture me about responsibility from your ivory tower. You've been living off Dad's pension and Mom's life insurance for 3 years, rattling around in a house worth more than most people see in a lifetime. Your mother's life insurance barely covered her medical bills. The point is, you have options. Real options. You're just too selfish to use them. There was that word again. Selfish. As if wanting to keep the home where I'd built my entire adult life was somehow morally wrong. I offered you what I could afford, I said quietly. What you could afford without inconveniencing yourself. What about what I can afford? What about what your grandchildren can afford when we're living in our car? You're not going to be living in your car. How do you know? How do you know anything about what we're facing? You sit in your comfortable house with your comfortable pension, making comfortable judgments about other people's desperation. I stood up, paced to the kitchen window. Outside, winter morning light made everything look stark and cold. Wayne, please, let's talk about this calmly. I am calm. I'm explaining simple math to someone who apparently doesn't understand numbers. 15,000 doesn't solve 50,000 in debt. A co-signed loan doesn't help someone whose credit is already destroyed. Your little solutions are meaningless. They're not meaningless to me. That's because you don't understand the scale of real problems. You live in this bubble where 15,000 feels significant because you've never faced serious financial pressure. The unfairness of it stole my breath. I'd worked construction summers to pay for engineering school. Margaret and I had lived on soup and sandwiches for months when Wayne was born, saving every penny for his future. We'd driven the same car for 12 years, worn the same winter coats until they fell apart. I faced plenty of financial pressure, I said. Your mother and I? That was 50 years ago. Things are different now. Money, is different now. If you don't have real money to offer, don't waste my time pretending to help. Real money. Everything else was apparently play money, monopoly money, not worth serious consideration. So unless I sell my house, I'm wasting your time? Finally, you understand. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone until the dial tone became unbearable, then let my hand fall to my side. The receiver clattered to the kitchen floor. My coffee had gone cold. My hands were shaking again, and somewhere deep in my chest, something had broken that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. The next 4 days passed in a haze of disbelief and growing clarity. I wandered through the house, touching Margaret's belongings, her reading glasses on the bedroom nightstand, her favorite coffee mug still in the kitchen cabinet, the quilt she'd made hanging over the living room sofa. Each morning I walked through her garden. The rose bushes stood dormant, their bare branches reaching toward gray December sky like arthritic fingers. This was where she'd spent her happiest hours, nurturing life from soil. Now everything lay sleeping until spring, except some things I was learning never wake up. By the third day, Frank knocked on my kitchen door. "You look terrible," he said, settling into the chair across from mine with his own coffee cup. "Feel worse." "Wayne again?" I told him about the second phone call, Wayne's dismissal of my life savings as pathetic pocket change. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head. "My brother-in-law was like that," Frank said when I finished. "Always saw family as a source of funding for his schemes. Started with small requests, 100 here, 200 there. Then it was thousands. Finally wanted us to mortgage our house for his restaurant idea." "What did you do?" "Said no. He didn't speak to us for 2 years." Frank sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Best 2 years of our marriage, if I'm being honest." I stared out the kitchen window at the frost-covered bird bath Margaret had loved. But Wayne's my son. Wayne's a 42-year-old man who made 42-year-old choices. You didn't force him to gamble away his family's money. It wasn't gambling. It was investing. Frank raised an eyebrow. Potato, potato. Point is, his poor decisions don't create obligations for you. That afternoon, I sat in my study surrounded by legal documents, my will, insurance papers, the house deed. Margaret and I had been so careful with our finances, so deliberate about building security for our old age. We'd planned for medical emergencies, home repairs, even long-term care if needed. We hadn't planned for our son treating us like a bank to be robbed. I opened the will, read the section about Wayne's inheritance. Everything would go to him eventually. The house, the remaining savings, Margaret's jewelry. But eventually wasn't soon enough for Wayne. He wanted his inheritance now while I was still breathing. The realization hit like cold water. Wayne wasn't thinking of me as his father anymore. He was thinking of me as an obstacle standing between him and money. That evening, Frank called to check on me. "I keep thinking about something you said," I told him, "about family being a source of funding. Is that all I am to Wayne now?" "What do you think?" I thought about Wayne's tone when he'd called my savings pathetic, the casual cruelty when he'd dismissed 40 years of careful planning as meaningless, the way he'd hung up the moment I wouldn't agree to sell my house. "I think my son is gone," I said quietly, "and I don't know who this person is who's taken his place." "Sometimes people show you who they really are when they're desperate," Frank said. "Sometimes desperation just reveals what was always there." "You think Wayne was always this selfish?" "I think Wayne was always spoiled. You and Margaret gave him everything he wanted. College paid for, help with his house down payment, Christmas gifts for the kids every year. He's never had to face real consequences for poor choices." The truth of it stung. We had made things easy for Wayne, maybe too easy. "What would Margaret say about all this?" I asked. Frank was quiet for a moment. "Margaret would be heartbroken. But she'd also be furious at Wayne for treating you this way. She'd want you to protect yourself." After we hung up, I walked through the house one more time. Every room held memories of the family. Wayne claimed I was being selfish to preserve. His first steps in the hallway, birthday parties in the dining room, Christmas mornings around the tree in the living room. But those memories were of a different Wayne, a boy who'd helped me rake leaves, who'd cried when his pet hamster died, who'd hugged me tight when I'd taught him to ride his bike. That boy had grown into a man who called his father's life savings pathetic. Standing in Margaret's sewing room, I made a decision. I wouldn't sell my house to fund Wayne's poor choices, but I also wouldn't let him destroy what remained of our relationship with his demands and manipulation. The next time Wayne called, I'd be ready with an answer that protected both my home and my dignity. I just hoped I'd have the strength to follow through. December the 21st arrived with the kind of bitter cold that makes bones ache. I was stirring soup for dinner when the phone rang, cutting through the kitchen's warmth like winter wind through an open door. Wayne's name appeared on the caller ID. My hand hesitated over the receiver, Frank's warnings echoing in my memory. 5 days had passed since Wayne's brutal dismissal of my help. 5 days of silence that had actually brought me peace. On the fourth ring, I answered. "Dad?" Wayne's voice sounded different, softer, almost uncertain. "I'm glad you picked up." I said nothing, waiting. "Look, I owe you an apology. A big one." He paused, and I could hear background sounds, Joanna moving around what sounded like their kitchen, the distant voices of children. I was completely out of line the other day. Stress makes people say terrible things, but that's no excuse. Still, I remained silent. Something felt rehearsed about his words, too carefully chosen. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here." "I've been thinking about what you said, about taking things slower, finding other solutions. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was being too demanding. Demanding, that was one word for it. The thing is," Wayne continued, his voice warming with what sounded like genuine emotion, "Christmas is in 4 days. Joanna's been cooking all week, and the kids have been asking about Grandpa Roger. They want to show you their school projects, tell you about their Christmas list." Through the phone, I heard a child's voice, Tommy maybe, calling something about presents. Normal family sounds that tugged at parts of my heart I'd been trying to protect. "I know I hurt you," Wayne said quietly. "I know I said things that were cruel and unfair. But Dad, it's Christmas. Come to dinner. Let's be a family again." The invitation hung in the air between us. Part of me, the grandfather part, the part that remembered Wayne as a sweet child, wanted to accept immediately. But Frank's voice whispered warnings about manipulation, about people who only showed kindness when they wanted something. "I don't know, Wayne. Please." His voice cracked slightly. "The kids have been asking why Grandpa can't come. What am I supposed to tell them? That adults sometimes say stupid things they don't mean?" The guilt was immediate and sharp. Lula and Tommy didn't deserve to suffer because their father and I couldn't get along. They were innocent in all this, just children who wanted their grandfather at Christmas dinner. Have you told Joanna about your financial situation?" A pause. "Some of it. She knows things are tight." "Not the whole truth, then, but maybe that was Wayne's choice to make." "Dad, I promise. No talk about money. No pressure about anything. Just family dinner. Just Christmas. The kids have presents for you. Little handmade things from school. Lula made you a clay mug in art class." A handmade mug. The thought of my granddaughter carefully shaping clay, thinking of me, nearly broke my resolve completely. "Joanna's making her famous prime rib," Wayne continued. "Remember how much you loved it last year? She's been planning the menu for weeks." I could picture it, the warm kitchen, children's laughter, the comfortable chaos of family gathering. It had been my favorite tradition since Margaret died, the one day each year when the house felt truly alive again. "I won't take no for an answer," Wayne said, but his tone was playful now, like he used to use when asking for later bedtimes or extra allowance. "The kids would never forgive me if Grandpa missed Christmas." Behind his voice, I heard Joanna call something about setting the table. Heard one of the children ask if Grandpa was coming. Normal family sounds from normal family people. Maybe I was being too suspicious. Maybe stress really had made Wayne say things he didn't mean. Maybe Christmas dinner could help us find our way back to each other. "What time?" I heard myself ask. 4 o'clock. And Dad? Thank you. This means everything to all of us. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, watching steam rise from my forgotten soup. Something still felt wrong about Wayne's sudden change of heart, but the prospect of seeing Lula and Tommy outweighed my caution. 4 days until Christmas dinner. 4 days to decide whether I was making a terrible mistake. December the 22nd dawned crisp and bright, winter sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows like a promise. For the first time in days, I woke without that familiar knot in my stomach. Wayne's apology had felt genuine, and the prospect of seeing Lula and Tommy filled me with anticipation I hadn't felt since Margaret died. While making coffee, I found myself humming one of her favorite Christmas carols. The melody felt rusty in my throat, but right somehow. I pulled out my kitchen calendar, circled December 24th with a red pen, then stood back to admire it, like a child marking countdown to Christmas morning. The toy store downtown buzzed with last-minute shoppers. I wandered the aisles carefully, studying age recommendations and educational value the way Margaret had taught me. For Lula, I selected a chemistry set designed for young scientists. She'd always been curious about how things worked. Tommy got a model airplane kit, something we could build together if he visited again. At the checkout counter, the saleswoman smiled. "Lucky grandchildren." "I hope so," I said, meaning it more than she could know. That evening, Frank appeared at my kitchen door without calling first. His face carried the kind of concern usually reserved for doctor visits. "You're making a mistake," he said, settling into his usual chair. "Nice to see you too, Frank." "I'm serious, Roger. Something doesn't smell right about Wayne's sudden change of heart." I poured him coffee, stirring my own thoughtfully. "People can change. Stress makes us say things we don't mean. Stress reveals who we really are." Frank leaned forward, elbows on my kitchen table. "Think about the timing. He calls you pathetic, hangs up on you, ignores you for 5 days, then suddenly remembers he loves you. Maybe he talked to Joanna. Maybe she made him realize how cruel he'd been. Or maybe he realized insulting you wasn't getting him what he wanted. The word stung because part of me wondered the same thing. But the alternative, believing my son was irredeemably selfish, hurt too much to accept. "The children have been asking about me," I said. "Wayne told me so." Frank's expression softened slightly. "I know you miss them, but manipulative people use whatever leverage works, even innocent children." After Frank left, I spent the evening in my study, looking through photo albums again. Pictures of Wayne's childhood, birthday parties where he'd seemed genuinely happy to share cake with friends, Christmas mornings where his face had lit up at seeing what we'd sacrificed to buy him. That sweet boy had to still exist somewhere inside the angry man who'd called my life savings pathetic. December 23rd, I tackled Margaret's apple pie recipe. Her handwriting covered the yellowed index card in precise blue ink. Measurements, timing notes, temperature reminders accumulated over decades of practice. My hands shook slightly as I measured flour, remembering how she'd guided my fingers the first time I'd tried to help. The kitchen filled with scents of cinnamon and nutmeg, transforming the house into something that felt alive again. For 3 hours, I existed in a bubble where Margaret might walk through the door any moment, complaining about my messy technique, while secretly pleased I was trying. When the pie emerged golden and perfect, I nearly wept. That evening, I wrapped presents at the kitchen table with the same methodical care Margaret had always shown. Sharp corners, precisely measured ribbon, gift tags written in my neatest handwriting. Lula and Tommy deserved that attention to detail, deserved to feel special. My phone rang while I was tying the final bow. "How are the preparations going, Dad?" Wayne sounded genuinely interested. "Good. I made your mother's apple pie. The kids will love that. They've been asking about Grandpa's cooking all week." The warmth in his voice melted the last of my resistance. This was my son, the boy who'd helped me in the garden, who'd cried at his mother's funeral, who'd once told me I was his hero. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," I said. "We all are. 4 o'clock sharp, and Dad, thank you for giving us another chance." After hanging up, I laid out my clothes for Christmas Eve. The red sweater Margaret had knitted my last Christmas, pressed slacks, the tie Wayne had given me for Father's Day 2 years ago. Everything had to be perfect. Standing in my bedroom, I caught my reflection in Margaret's vanity mirror, an old man preparing to spend Christmas with his family, hope and nervousness warring in his expression. Frank's warnings echoed in my memory, but I pushed them aside. Some risks were worth taking, especially when innocent children were involved. Tomorrow, I'd find out whether my son had truly changed, or whether Frank's suspicions were justified. Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold, but my spirits remained bright as I loaded wrapped gifts into my car. The 40-minute drive to Wayne's townhouse passed quickly, filled with mental rehearsals of conversations with my grandchildren and careful navigation through unfamiliar suburban streets. Wayne's neighborhood looked picture perfect, matching mailboxes, manicured lawns, Christmas lights twinkling from every roofline. His townhouse sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, decorated with wreaths and garland that Joanna had probably spent days arranging. I gathered the gifts from my back seat, taking a deep breath of winter air before walking to the front door. Through the frosted glass, I could see movement, hear children's voices raised in excitement. Wayne opened the door before I could knock, his face breaking into what looked like genuine joy. "Dad!" Perfect timing. He pulled me into a firm hug that felt real, not performed. "The kids have been watching for your car for an hour." Before I could respond, Lula appeared at Wayne's side, dark hair flying as she threw herself at my legs. "Grandpa, we missed you so much." Tommy materialized seconds later, slightly more reserved but grinning widely. "Did you bring the magic tricks? Mom said you might remember some." The warmth that flooded my chest was pure and uncomplicated. These children loved me without agenda, without calculations about money or property. Their affection was the most honest thing I'd experienced in months. "Let's see what Santa brought for you two," I said, hefting the gift bags. The living room blazed with Christmas cheer, a 7-foot tree heavy with ornaments, stockings hanging from the mantel, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Joanna emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron dusted with flour, her smile warm but somehow strained. "Roger, so wonderful to see you." Her hug felt tentative, and she avoided prolonged eye contact. "Dinner's almost ready. Prime rib, just like you love." "Smells incredible." I handed her Margaret's apple pie. "Thought this might go well with dinner?" Her eyes brightened with what looked like genuine pleasure. "The children will be thrilled. They've been asking about Grandma Margaret's recipes." Gift opening became a joyful chaos. Lula squealed over the chemistry set, immediately opening boxes to examine test tubes and color tablets. Tommy studied the airplane kit with serious concentration, tracing wing designs with one finger. "Can we build it together, Grandpa?" "Absolutely. Next visit, we'll make it fly." Wayne watched these interactions with apparent satisfaction, playing the proud father perfectly. He helped Tommy organize airplane pieces, praised Lula's scientific enthusiasm, took pictures of every moment with his phone. "Family photo time," he announced, positioning everyone around the tree. "This might be our best Christmas yet." Standing with my arm around Wayne's shoulders, Lula and Tommy pressed against my sides. I felt something I hadn't experienced since Margaret died, complete belonging. Whatever doubts Frank had planted seemed foolish now. This was my family, flawed but real, and we were together. Dinner preparation moved everyone toward the dining room, where Joanna had created a magazine-worthy table setting. White linens, gold-rimmed china, candles reflecting off crystal glasses filled with deep red wine. The prime rib sat at the head of the table like a centerpiece, surrounded by roasted vegetables and Yorkshire pudding. "This is beautiful, Joanna," I said, settling into my assigned seat. She bustled around the table, making final adjustments to place settings with nervous energy. "Just want everything perfect for Christmas." Wayne took his position at the head of the table, raising his wine glass with ceremonial gravity. "Before we eat, I want to make a toast." His voice carried the weight of significance. "To family, to forgiveness, to second chances and the people who matter most." Everyone raised their glasses. Even the children had small portions of wine mixed with juice. The crystal caught candlelight, creating tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. "To family," we echoed in unison. The wine was excellent, rich and smooth with hints of cherry. I savored both the taste and the moment, feeling grateful for Wayne's maturity in reaching out, for Joanna's hospitality, for my grandchildren's unconditional love. Around the table, conversation flowed easily. Tommy described his school's Christmas pageant. Lula explained her science fair project. Wayne shared funny stories from his office. Normal family interaction, the kind Margaret and I had dreamed of when Wayne was small. But as I reached for my water glass, something felt slightly off. A faint dizziness, like standing up too quickly after sitting too long. I blinked, attributing it to the wine and excitement of the evening. The conversation continued to flow around the table as I savored the moment of family unity. Wayne carved the prime rib with practiced skill while Joanna served vegetables, the children chattering about their Christmas morning plans. Everything felt perfectly normal, perfectly right. "Grandpa, do you want to see my clay mug after dinner?" Lula asked, bouncing slightly in her chair. "Absolutely. I hear it's a masterpiece." The wine had been stronger than I had expected, leaving me feeling pleasantly warm. Or maybe it was just the joy of being included again, of sitting at a family table where I was wanted, rather than merely tolerated. I reached for my water glass, noticed my hand seemed slightly unsteady. Must be the excitement. My heart had been racing since I'd arrived, overwhelmed by the children's enthusiasm and Wayne's apparent transformation. "Dad, you look a little flushed," Wayne observed with what sounded like genuine concern. "Everything okay?" "Just warm. Joanna's cooking always makes me feel at home." But as I spoke, something twisted uncomfortably in my stomach, a sharp cramp that made me shift in my chair. The sensation passed quickly, and I dismissed it as overindulgence. The rich food, the wine, the emotional intensity of reconciliation. Tommy was telling a story about his teacher's pet rabbit when the room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the table, blinking to clear my vision. The candles appeared to blur, their flames stretching into golden streaks. "Are you sure you're all right, Roger?" Joanna's voice carried a note of anxiety that seemed disproportionate to my minor discomfort. "Just need some water." I tried to smile reassuringly, but my mouth felt strangely dry despite the wine. Wayne half rose from his chair. "Kitchen's right through there if you want fresh water. Take your time." The cramping in my stomach intensified, accompanied now by waves of nausea that made swallowing difficult. I pressed my hand to my forehead, feeling clammy sweat despite the room's comfortable temperature. Maybe I should... I started to stand, then sat back down abruptly as dizziness swept over me. The dining room spun lazily, faces around the table becoming soft and unfocused. "Grandpa?" Lula's voice sounded far away, though she sat directly across from me. "You don't look good." "Should we call someone?" Joanna asked quietly, her hands twisting her napkin into tight spirals. Wayne's voice remained calm, helpful. "Dad, why don't you step into the kitchen? Maybe splash some cold water on your face? The excitement of tonight might be overwhelming." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The nausea was building steadily, my stomach clenching with increasing frequency. Standing required conscious effort. My legs felt disconnected from my body, responding sluggishly to mental commands. "Sorry," I managed to say. "Don't want to ruin Christmas dinner." "You're not ruining anything," Wayne assured me, his tone perfectly balanced between concern and reassurance. "These things happen. Take all the time you need." The walk to the kitchen seemed to stretch impossibly long. I used the wall for support, my vision swimming as familiar Christmas sounds continued behind me. Children's voices, the clink of silverware against plates, Wayne explaining to Lula and Tommy that sometimes older people just needed rest. Each step required concentration. My breathing had become shallow, labored, as if the air itself had grown thick. The hallway walls pressed closer, the kitchen doorway wavering like a mirage. Behind me, I heard Joanna's voice, barely above a whisper. "Should we—" "He'll be fine," Wayne interrupted smoothly. "Just needs a moment to collect himself." But I wasn't fine. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with my body. My heart raced while my limbs grew heavy. My mouth tasted metallic, foreign. The comfortable warmth of family dinner had transformed into something cold and frightening. I reached the kitchen doorway, gripping the frame to steady myself. The room beyond looked different somehow. Shadows seemed deeper, surfaces more distant. Everything familiar had become threatening. The kitchen felt like stepping into a different world. Cool tile beneath my feet, harsh overhead lighting that made me squint after the dining room's gentle candlelight. I leaned against the counter, gripping the granite edge as another wave of nausea rolled through me. Something was seriously wrong. This wasn't excitement or wine or rich food. My body was betraying me in ways that felt foreign and terrifying. I turned toward the sink, seeking cold water, when movement by the kitchen table caught my eye. A small glass vial lay on its side next to Wayne's car keys, clear liquid still visible in the bottom. My vision blurred as I tried to focus on it, but the shape was unmistakable. Medicine bottle. Empty. The room tilted dangerously. I reached out blindly for support, my hand knocking against a mixing bowl on the counter. The ceramic shattered against the floor, pieces scattering across tiles like scattered thoughts. "Dad?" Wayne's voice called from the dining room. "Everything okay in there?" I stared at the vial, my mind working sluggishly through implications. Medicine. Empty. Wayne's keys. The wine toast. The careful timing. "Fine," I called back, my voice barely recognizable. "Just clumsy." But I wasn't fine. My son had poisoned me. The thought should have felt impossible, but it settled into my consciousness with horrible clarity. Wayne's sudden apology. The insistence on Christmas dinner. The toast to family. Joanna's nervous energy. The way Wayne had watched me drink. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The screen swam in and out of focus as I tried to dial 911. My fingers wouldn't cooperate, hitting wrong numbers, sliding off the smooth surface. "Need some help?" Wayne's voice came from directly behind me. I spun around, nearly falling as vertigo swept through me. He stood in the kitchen doorway, no longer wearing the mask of concerned son. His expression was calm, calculating, almost curious, as he watched me struggle. "You did this." The words came out slurred, thick. "You poisoned me?" Wayne stepped into the kitchen, closing the door quietly behind him. "Smart man. Even dying, you figure things out." "Why?" I backed against the counter, phone still clutched uselessly in my trembling hand. "Because you're selfish. Because you'd rather die in that ridiculous house than help your own family. Because you chose memories over your son's future." The coldness in his voice was worse than the poison coursing through my system. This wasn't stress or desperation speaking. This was calculation, planning, murder. The children will inherit everything once you're gone, and I'm your only surviving family member. They'll never want for anything again. I tried to press 911 on my phone, but Wayne moved faster than my weakened reflexes could manage. He plucked the device from my hands, sliding it across the counter and out of reach. "That won't be necessary. You're having a heart attack brought on by the excitement of Christmas dinner. Very sad. Very believable for a man your age." "Joanna knows." The words felt thick as paste in my mouth. "Joanna will say whatever I tell her to say. She's good at following directions when our children's welfare is at stake." My legs gave out. I slid down the cabinet doors until I was sitting on the cold tile floor, back pressed against wood that felt like my only anchor to reality. The kitchen spun slowly around me, Wayne standing in the center like the eye of a hurricane. "This didn't have to happen," he said conversationally. "You could have sold the house voluntarily. Could have helped your family when we needed it. Instead, you chose to be stubborn. I worked 40 years for that house." My voice was barely a whisper now. "And now it's mine. Along with your savings, your pension, everything. Funny how death simplifies property law." The vial on the table came into sharper focus as my vision narrowed. Something clear, odorless, tasteless. Something that would mimic a heart attack in an elderly man. "What did you give me?" Wayne glanced at his watch. "Does it matter? You'll be unconscious in about 10 minutes. Dead in 30. The coroner will find an old man who pushed himself too hard during an emotional evening." 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to either save myself or stop Wayne from destroying other lives. My phone lay 8 feet away across a kitchen that might as well have been 8 miles. "Lula and Tommy?" I gasped. "They love me. They'll get over it. Children are resilient. Besides, they'll be too busy enjoying their inheritance to mourn for long." The casual cruelty of it broke something inside me that had nothing to do with poison. My son had become a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. A stranger might have felt guilt or hesitation. Wayne felt nothing but satisfaction at his own cleverness. But he'd made one mistake. He was talking instead of leaving. Pride in his plan was keeping him here when he should have returned to the dining room to establish his alibi. And I still had 6 minutes of consciousness left. The distant wail of sirens cut through the winter night like a blade through silk. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, watching through the kitchen window as red and blue lights painted the suburban street in emergency colors. "They're here," I whispered to the dispatcher. "Police are outside." "Stay on the line, sir. The officers will want to speak with you directly." Heavy footsteps thundered up Wayne's front walkway. Sharp knocks echoed through the house, followed by authoritative voices calling Wayne's name. From the dining room came the sound of chairs scraping against hardwood, children's confused questions, Joanna's sharp intake of breath. "Police! Open the door!" Wayne's voice carried from the front hall, bewildered and increasingly panicked. "Officers, what's this about? It's Christmas Eve. My family's eating dinner." I heard the front door open, multiple sets of boots entering the house. Professional voices requesting identification, asking about household members, demanding to speak with Roger Harper immediately. "My father's in the kitchen," Wayne said, his tone shifting toward suspicion. "Is he all right? Has something happened?" The kitchen door swung open. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by paramedics carrying medical equipment. The first officer, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, approached me carefully. "Mr. Harper, I'm Officer Martinez. We understand you've been poisoned." I held up the small glass vial with trembling fingers. "Rat poison. Arsenic-based. I found it hidden among the spice jars after drinking wine that made me sick." Officer Martinez took the bottle with gloved hands, studying the label through an evidence bag. Her partner began photographing the kitchen, documenting the spice rack, the wine glasses still sitting on the counter. "The person who poisoned you, is he still in the house?" "My son Wayne. He's in the dining room with his family." The words felt surreal leaving my mouth. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, the man who just tried to murder me for inheritance money. From the dining room came Wayne's voice, rising in pitch, as understanding dawned. "Dad? What are you telling them? What's happening?" Officer Martinez spoke into her radio. "Need backup officers in dining room. Suspect present with potential hostages." "The children are innocent," I said quickly. His wife Joanna knew about the plan, but was threatened into compliance. "The kids know nothing." Paramedics began checking my vital signs, asking about symptoms and timing. Blood pressure cuff, pulse oximeter, questions about nausea and dizziness. Their efficient professionalism was reassuring. I was going to survive this. The kitchen door burst open. Wayne stood framed in the doorway, his face cycling through confusion, realization, and finally, cold fury. "You called the police on me? On Christmas Eve? In front of my children?" 2 officers flanked him immediately, hands resting on their service weapons. Wayne's eyes fixed on the evidence bag containing the poison bottle, and his expression changed completely. The mask of concerned son disappeared, replaced by something calculating and dangerous. "Wayne Harper, you're under arrest for attempted murder." Officer Martinez's voice was steady, professional. "You have the right to remain silent." "This is insane." Wayne's voice cracked with desperation. "I didn't poison anyone." He's confused, sick, making accusations. But his eyes told a different story. The careful calculation was still there, weighing options, looking for escape routes, or explanations that might work. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The handcuffs clicked into place with metallic finality. Wayne's face drained of color. As the reality hit him, his plan had failed completely. Not only was I alive, but I'd found evidence that would send him to prison. From the dining room came the sound of children crying, Joanna's voice trying to comfort them through her own sobs, Lula calling for her daddy, Tommy asking why the police were being mean to everyone. "The children," I said to Officer Martinez, "they shouldn't see this. Social services is en route. We'll make sure they're protected." Wayne was led through the kitchen toward the front door, his head down, shoulders slumped in defeat. As he passed my chair, he looked up one final time. "I hope you're satisfied," he said quietly. "You've destroyed your own family." "No, Wayne. You did that when you decided money was worth more than love." The paramedics helped me to my feet, supporting my weight as we moved toward the ambulance waiting outside. Through the front window, I could see neighbors gathering on their lawns despite the cold, drawn by the emergency lights and police activity. Christmas Eve in suburban Detroit had become a crime scene. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of Joanna holding both children, all 3 of them crying as a social worker approached with gentle words and official papers. The family Wayne had claimed to be protecting was now shattered completely by his actions. The ambulance doors closed, cutting off the sight of flashing lights and broken dreams. February brought the kind of crisp Michigan morning that made everything feel possible again. I stood in my kitchen making coffee the way Margaret had taught me 40 years ago, watching Frank navigate my icy driveway with his usual careful determination. The past 2 months had transformed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Wayne's trial had lasted only 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming, his plan too obvious, his motive too clear. 15 years for attempted murder, with no possibility of parole for the first decade. "Morning, survivor," Frank said, stamping snow off his boots at my back door. "How are you feeling?" "Grateful." The word came easier now than it had in January, when grief and betrayal had made simple breathing difficult. "Coffee's fresh." We'd developed new routines since my release from the hospital. Frank's daily visits, shared meals, quiet conversations about everything except Wayne's current location in state prison. Some wounds needed time to heal properly. The doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock. Joanna stood on my front porch with Lula and Tommy, their weekend bags packed for another stay with their grandfather. The divorce proceedings had been swift. No one wanted to remain married to an attempted murderer, but Joanna's financial situation remained precarious. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice still carrying shame even 3 months later. "Thank you again for this. I know you don't have to—" "They're my grandchildren," I interrupted gently. "This is their home, too." Lula and Tommy rushed past their mother, familiar now with the weekend routine. Homework at the kitchen table, afternoon projects in the garage, evening stories by the fireplace. Normal grandparent activities that felt revolutionary after everything we'd survived. "Did you finish the airplane, Grandpa?" Tommy asked, already heading toward the workbench where our model sat in various stages of completion. "Waiting for you to attach the wings. Can't have a proper first flight without the chief engineer present." While the children settled in, Joanna and I reviewed the legal paperwork that had become part of our new reality. The educational trust for Lula and Tommy was fully funded now. College tuition, graduate school if they chose, money for books and living expenses. Wayne's attempt to steal their future had instead secured it completely. "The charity distributions are going well," I told her, showing bank statements that detailed monthly payments to veterans organizations, the local hospital, community programs that helped families in crisis. Margaret would have approved. "What about Wayne?" Joanna asked quietly. "Do you ever think about visiting him?" I considered the question while watching Tommy carefully align airplane wings, his small face serious with concentration. "I think about the boy he used to be. I mourn that child. But the man who tried to poison me for money? That person is a stranger." Frank nodded approvingly from his chair by the window. "Forgiveness doesn't require stupidity." "The children ask about their father sometimes," Joanna continued. "I don't know what to tell them. Tell them he made bad choices and has to face consequences. Tell them those choices don't define them or limit their futures. Tell them their grandfather loves them." Later that afternoon, Frank and I worked in Margaret's garden while the children played in the backyard snow. Spring was still weeks away, but we were preparing beds for new plantings, clearing dead growth to make room for whatever would grow next. "You know what I've learned?" I said, resting against my shovel. "Wayne was right about one thing. I was living in the past, keeping this house like a shrine to Margaret." Frank looked up from the rose bush he was pruning. "And now?" "Now it's a home again, full of children's laughter and family dinners and people who choose to be here because they love each other, not because they want something." Through the kitchen window, I could see Lula and Tommy at the table, working on homework with the same focused intensity I remembered from Wayne's childhood. But unlike their father, they would grow up understanding the difference between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and financial obligation. "Will you change your will again?" Frank asked us. "Leave them the house?" "Eventually, when they're old enough to understand what it represents. Not money or property, but the choice to build something lasting, something worth protecting." That evening, after Joanna collected the children and Frank returned to his own house, I sat in Margaret's chair by the living room window. The neighborhood was quiet, settled into Sunday evening routines. Normal families in normal houses, probably dealing with normal problems that didn't involve poison or attempted murder. My phone rang. Frank, checking in before bedtime, as had become his habit. "Any regrets about not selling the house when Wayne asked?" I looked around the room where Margaret and I had celebrated 40 Christmases, where Wayne had opened presents as a child, where Lula and Tommy now felt safe and loved. "None whatsoever," I said. "This house has good bones. It survived one person trying to destroy it from the inside. It'll outlast whatever comes next." After we hung up, I made one final cup of coffee and stepped onto the back porch. Winter air sharp in my lungs, stars visible through bare tree branches. Somewhere in a prison cell 2 hours away, Wayne was learning that some consequences last longer than others. But here, in the home he'd tried to steal, life continued. Children would grow up safely. Money would help people instead of corrupting them. Love would be freely given rather than strategically withheld. Justice, I discovered, wasn't just about punishment. It was about protection. It was about making sure the good things survived, while the toxic things were contained where they couldn't spread. Margaret would have understood completely. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.